Queen Sarilith Varen did not flinch as the ceremonial torches ignited around the Hall of Crowns. Their pale blue flames cast shifting light across her silver armor, reflecting the insignia of every dynasty that had ruled the Varanth dominion. At 38 years old, she had governed half her life, and for almost as long, she had lived bound to a vow that shaped every heartbeat, every decision, every breath she allowed herself to take. "I stand before my ancestors," she spoke, voice resonant across marble and metal, "and I reaffirm what I vowed 20 cycles ago. I will take no mate. I will form no bond. I will not allow personal attachment to compromise my duty." The assembled nobles bowed in flawless unison. Sarilith held their gaze without hesitation. Her luminous violet eyes, slit-pupilled and bright as nebula light, had unsettled stronger warriors than these. She had built her reign upon discipline, unyielding strength, absolute clarity. Alone, she had unified the Dominion's fractured border worlds. Alone, she had kept her empire from shattering under internal ambition and external threat. She believed in the vow because she had become the vow, until the humans arrived. FTL signatures had been detected only a year earlier. Their technology was primitive by Varanth measure, but impressive given their youth as a species. Sarilith had agreed to a diplomatic audience purely out of curiosity. New species were either problems or assets, better to determine which quickly. What she did not expect was him. Captain Adrian Holt stepped forward as the human delegation was introduced, and Sarilith felt her focus narrow with the precision of a blade. He was tall for his species, broad-shouldered with the unmistakable bearing of a veteran soldier. A faint scar cut across one brow, a pale contrast against warm human skin. His dark hair was tied back with practical simplicity, but it was his eyes that caught her fully, steady, deep-set, quietly assessing. Most beings recoiled from a queen's gaze. Adrian Holt met hers head-on and did not look away. "Captain Holt serves as our defensive advisor," Ambassador Renfield explained. "He will answer any military inquiries." "A warrior among envoys," Sarilith noted, studying him openly. Adrian inclined his head in a gesture that was not quite a bow. "Your Majesty, humanity values transparency and diplomacy. Our ambassador speaks for our government. I speak for those who protect it." Her generals stiffened at the casual directness, but Sarilith raised a hand and silence rippled outward. "Honesty," she said, "is welcome in my court." The reception continued, a maze of political formality, and Sarilith performed her role with ease. But her attention returned again and again to the human soldier who stood at parade, rest behind his ambassador. He watched everything with quiet readiness, posture relaxed yet alert, as if danger were a constant he had long ago accepted as part of existence. He did not try to charm, impress, or calculate. He simply existed with an authenticity Sarilith found unsettling. That night, seeking clarity, she walked her private starlit gardens, bioluminescent trees breathing faint trails of blue into the dark. She rarely invited others here. The gardens were the one place she could shed the weight of the crown and simply be. She sensed him before she heard him. "I didn't mean to intrude," Adrian said softly from the archway. He wore no armor now, just simple travel clothes. "A door was open. I followed the sound of light. I've never seen plants that glow." Her guards should have stopped him, yet none had. Strange. "You are far from the diplomatic quarters, Captain," she said, approaching with controlled poise. "This part of the palace is restricted." "I know," he admitted. "I'll leave if you wish." She should have ordered him gone. Protocol demanded it. Instead, Sarilith heard herself say, quietly, deliberately, "Stay." Adrian stepped inside with respectful caution, allowing a breath of distance between them, as though giving her the space to change her mind. "These trees," he murmured, watching soft tendrils of blue light coil around her fingertips as she touched a blooming branch. "They look alive in a way ours don't." "They are," Varanth Flora evolved under a shrouded sun. Light became their language. She paused. "I planted this one myself. It only blooms once every 10 cycles." Adrian studied her, not the crown, not the armor, her. "Even queens need small victories," he said, her breath caught. It was such a simple sentence, yet it pierced the armor she hadn't realized she had reforged tonight. "You are not a diplomat," she said at last. Adrian huffed softly. "Not even close. And yet your words carry weight." "Only because you listen." The glow from the trees illuminated her features, casting soft radiance along her high cheekbones and the elegant shape of her elongated ears. She realized with mild alarm that she was allowing him to stand closer than anyone had in years. "Your vow," he said suddenly. "I heard of it, a heavy thing to carry. It is necessary." "Is it?" Adrian asked gently without challenge, only curiosity. "Or is it simply familiar?" The question slid under her defenses like a blade of soft metal, not meant to wound, but to reveal. Sarilith stepped back before she forgot how. "It grows late," she said, regaining her composure. "Return to your quarters, Captain Holt." Adrian inclined his head, neither disappointed nor presumptuous. "As you command, Your Majesty." But when he turned to leave, she felt something she had not felt in 20 cycles. The first, fragile crack in a vow she once believed unbreakable. And as the glowing trees rustled around her, Sarilith knew with unsettling clarity. Humanity had, for 3 days after their encounter in the starlit gardens, Queen Sarilith Varen told herself that nothing had changed. She still arose before dawn to review border reports. She still inspected the palace guard with the precision of a blade. She still presided over council debates with the unshakable authority of a ruler who had never, not once, allowed her emotions to dictate her judgment. And yet she was lying to herself, because now, every time she entered the throne hall, her senses sought him. Every time a guard reported movement in the palace corridors, she wondered if it was him. And every time she tried to meditate, as she had done every morning of her adult life, her thoughts refused to still. The human soldier had unsettled her, not with insolence, not with challenge, with gentleness. Sarilith had faced warlords, assassins, political predators. She had never been shaken by kindness. On the 4th day, her military council convened to assess the human delegation's tactical knowledge. It was purely routine, an evaluation of whether Earth had anything of strategic value to offer. But when Captain Adrian Holt stepped into the chamber, Sarilith's breath caught in her throat. Not visibly, not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for her to feel ashamed of the reaction. He wore his duty uniform again, clean lines, dark fabric, no ornamentation. His posture was dignified without being stiff, his movements controlled without being rehearsed. A quiet balance of strength and humility. "Captain Holt," General Varick said, "we ask that you demonstrate your species' combat methodology." Adrian nodded once, "As you wish." Sarilith observed from her elevated seat as the demonstration began. The Varanth Dominion's warriors were larger, stronger, more heavily armored by nature. Humans were soft by comparison. Yet Adrian moved with lethal grace, his footwork efficient, his timing impeccable. Every strike he made was calibrated, precise, adaptive, economical. Her warriors underestimated him in the first bout. They did not make the same mistake in the second. By the third match, the chamber vibrated with the collective breath of onlookers. Adrian's opponent, a seasoned Varanth captain, lunged with a downward strike meant to overwhelm. Adrian stepped inside the attack instead of back. A risky choice. A soldier's choice. A choice someone made only when they understood danger intimately. He caught the blow on his forearm guard, pivoted sharply, and used the larger warrior's momentum to send him crashing to the floor. Silence. Then applause. Varanth warriors respected strength above all, and strength came in many forms. Sarilith felt something warm spread through her chest. Not pride, not attraction, something more dangerous. Recognition. When Adrian met her gaze across the chamber, she did not look away. "He sees me," a voice whispered inside her. "Not the crown, not the vow, me." She shut the thought down at once. After the demonstration, she dismissed the council, formally, professionally, flawlessly. Only when the chamber was empty did she allow herself a private breath. Then Adrian spoke behind her. "You left before the council finished their analysis," he said gently. "I had seen enough." Sarilith turned to face him, her expression carefully neutral. "Your demonstration was impressive. You seemed troubled." She stiffened. A queen does not become troubled. He did not apologize, he did not retreat. He simply stepped closer, slowly, respectfully, and said, "Sarilith, I think you might be allowed to." Her pulse stuttered. She had heard her own name spoken tens of thousands of times, by generals, nobles, foreign dignitaries, priests, assassins. But something about the way he said it, quiet, careful, as though he understood its weight, struck her differently. "You forget your place, Captain," she said, though the words lacked sharpness. "No," he replied softly. "I think I'm finally beginning to understand it." She inhaled sharply, uncertain whether the sensation blooming inside her was irritation or something far less defensible. Before she could respond, alarms blared, sharp, violent, echoing off the marble. Her guard captain rushed in. Your Majesty, unknown interference detected in the palace's eastern wing. Possible infiltration attempt. Adrian's posture shifted instantly, shoulders squared, eyes focused, hand brushing the sidearm at his hip. Your orders? He asked. Sarilith felt the old, familiar clarity settle into her bones. Secure the council chamber, she commanded. I will investigate the disturbance. With respect, Adrian said, stepping forward just enough to make the meaning clear. I'm coming with you. You are a foreign soldier on diplomatic grounds. I am a soldier, he corrected, and you may need one. Her guards looked ready to drag him away if she gave the signal. But she didn't. She held his gaze, those steady human eyes, unafraid of queens or danger. The eastern wing of the palace was too quiet. Even with alarms echoing through the marble corridors, an unnatural stillness clung to the air, a silence that did not belong in a living place. Queen Sarilith advanced with her guards, forming a protective wedge around her. Captain Adrian Holt moved at her flank, his steps soundless, his right hand hovering near his weapon but not yet drawing it. He moved like someone who had survived ambushes before. The tension tightened in Sarilith's chest. She told herself it was battle readiness. She suspected it was not. Your Majesty, her guard captain murmured, scanners show interference. Something's jamming our internal grid. Which means whoever is here came prepared, Sarilith replied. Stay alert. They approached the wide junction where 4 corridors met. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the hall into dim emergency glow. Shadows stretched across the walls, long and sharp like claws. Adrian's voice was low. Movement, left corridor. Sarilith didn't question how he heard it before her guards. She simply signaled and they advanced. 3 shadowed figures emerged, faces masked, armor matte black, their movements synchronized. Not amateurs, not thieves, professionals. Forces of House Varkesh, Sarilith muttered, recognizing the emblem etched faintly into their pauldrons. Traitors. The assassins struck without hesitation. The first rushed Sarilith directly. She sidestepped, her plasma blade igniting with a crackling burst of violet energy. The assassin's strike glanced off her forearm guard. Her counterstrike cut a glowing arc across his armor, dropping him instantly. The second attacker pivoted toward her exposed side. But Adrian was already there. He intercepted the blow with his own forearm, using his body weight to redirect the momentum before slamming his elbow into the assassin's faceplate. The impact sent the attacker reeling, giving Sarilith the angle she needed to finish the fight. Their movements aligned flawlessly, as though they had trained together for years instead of shared only a single night's walk through a garden. The third assassin retreated 2 steps, recalculating. Sarilith advanced. You invade my palace, she said coldly. You won't leave it. He lunged, and Adrian moved with terrifying speed, seizing the attacker's wrist and twisting sharply until bone cracked. The scream was muffled by the mask. Sarilith ended it cleanly. When silence finally settled, the queen straightened and scanned the corridor for more threats. Adrian exhaled, adrenaline humming beneath his calm exterior. Your soldiers are strong, he said softly, but these weren't meant to test them. This was a targeted strike. They came for me, Sarilith affirmed, his jaw tightened. Then we stay together. She turned sharply at that. Captain, but whatever reprimand she intended died on her tongue. His eyes, dark, steady, impossibly sincere, met hers with a conviction she had not expected. You are a political target, he said. A symbol, a threat. They won't stop with one attempt. Whether you command it or not, I'm not letting you walk into danger alone. Her heart reacted before her mind could restrain it, a stuttering, unwelcome jolt. I am Varinth's ruling sovereign. I am never alone. That's not what I meant. The words hung suspended between them. A distant explosion shook the floor. Smoke drifted through the air vents. The palace trembled with the unmistakable cadence of sustained conflict. The queen's guards snapped back into motion. Your Majesty, we must reach the central chamber. Sarilith lifted her chin, regal composure unfaltering. Then move. They pushed deeper into the wing. More attackers appeared, coordinated, relentless, well-trained. But Sarilith fought like a force of nature, her blade an extension of her will. Adrian fought beside her, filling the spaces she left open, covering angles she didn't need to name, meeting every threat with calculated precision. 3 corridors later, drenched in battle light and the metallic scent of ruptured circuitry, they paused in the tense quiet between clashes. Adrian's shoulder bled from a shallow cut. Sarilith's armor bore a char streak across one side. You're injured, she said. It's nothing. You should have pulled back, and leave your right flank open. He gave her a tired, wry look. Not happening. Sarilith stared at him, longer than she meant to, longer than was appropriate. His face was streaked with dust and sweat, yet he held himself with the same calm dignity as in the throne room. There was no arrogance, no bravado, only determination. "You fight," she murmured, "as if my life matters to you." His breath caught barely, but she saw it. "It does." A dangerous silence followed. Before she could respond, distant shouting echoed toward them. "Your Majesty!" A palace warrior sprinted into view. The infiltration point was a diversion. "They're moving toward the power core. We're losing shields." Sarilith stepped forward. "Then they intend structural collapse." Adrian holstered his weapon and looked to her. "Where do you need me?" Her guards glanced between them as if unsure when the human had become part of the chain of command. Sarilith didn't hesitate. "At my side." Adrian nodded once, certain, committed, unshaken. And in that moment, surrounded by smoke, alarms, and the heavy breath of war, Sarilith realized something she had never allowed herself to feel. She trusted him, not as a guest, not because diplomacy demanded it, but because the human had stood beside her not out of duty, but choice. "Captain Holt," she said, lowering her voice as they prepared to advance, "do not fall behind. I won't lose you in these corridors." He gave her a small, crooked smile that made her pulse leap in a way she resented. The corridors leading to the power core were carved from reinforced alloy and lined with conduits that pulsed faint blue, like veins beneath metal skin. Under normal conditions, this wing hummed with the quiet rhythm of controlled energy. Tonight, it shook with the violence of sabotage. Sparks rained from exposed wiring. Smoke snaked across the ceiling. Two of Sarilith's elite guards lay unconscious where they had fallen, breathing but gravely wounded. The infiltration had been precise, surgical. Someone had mapped the palace's vulnerabilities. "House Varkesh could not orchestrate this alone," Sarilith murmured, kneeling briefly beside a fallen warrior. "Their resources are limited." "Meaning they have allies," Adrian said. "Meaning," she corrected, "they have traitors." The queen rose, her blade igniting with a soft, menacing hum. Adrian moved beside her as if drawn by instinct. When they rounded the next bend, they found the heart of the sabotage effort. 6 armored insurgents working rapidly to breach the core chamber's external seals. Explosive charges lined the walls. If the charges detonated, half the palace would collapse. The power core's destabilization could trigger a chain reaction that reached the capital's central grid. Thousands could die. "Your Majesty," Adrian whispered, "we need to strike before they finish setting those." He didn't finish the sentence. A 7th insurgent dropped from the upper conduit and lunged at him, blade flashing. Adrian reacted instantly, blocking the strike with his forearm guard and countering with a sharp kick to the attacker's knee. The man staggered, but recovered quickly, just in time for Sarilith's blade to cut through the space between them in a deadly arc. Adrian stepped back, breath harsh. "They're stronger than the ones before." "Yes," Sarilith said. "These are elite operatives. And they're buying time." She understood immediately. The 6 insurgents weren't trying to fight them. They were stalling. Delaying, protecting the final charge, Sarilith surged forward. "Take the left flank." Adrian obeyed without hesitation. The next moments blurred into violent motion. Sarilith cut through 2 attackers with ruthless precision. Adrian grappled with a heavy-built insurgent twice his size, using leverage over strength, redirecting blows rather than trading them. Together, they forced the remaining saboteurs back from the core door, but one broke through their defense. A lone insurgent sprinted for the final charge, priming the detonator. Adrian saw him first. "Sarilith!" he shouted, and without waiting for command, he threw himself between the detonator and the queen. The insurgent struck the activation node. A blinding flash filled the corridor. Sarilith felt the shockwave slam into her chest, knocking the breath from her lungs. Heat tore across her skin. Light swallowed everything. Then darkness. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No sound, no motion, no breath. Her mind fought through the haze, anchored by a single instinctive panic. Adrian. Her vision cleared enough to see him lying on the floor, chest rising shallowly, one arm shielding his face. He had taken the brunt of the blast, and he had done it willingly. With a sound between a snarl and a gasp, Sarilith crawled toward him, ignoring her own injuries. "Adrian," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Look at me." He blinked, dazed. "Still alive," he croaked. "That's something." "You shielded me," she said, voice shaking despite her training. "Couldn't let you take the hit." He attempted a weak smile. "Kind of defeats the purpose of a diplomatic visit if the queen dies." Her throat tightened. She touched his cheek, gently, reverently, her fingertips brushing the soot and blood. His eyes widened slightly, then softened. Sarilith, he breathed, her name small and aching on his tongue. It was the first moment in 20 cycles that she did not feel like a queen. She felt like a person, a woman kneeling beside someone she could not bear to lose. Their moment shattered as more footsteps thundered toward them, more insurgents. Sarilith rose, fury igniting in her chest like a second sun. "Stay behind me," she commanded. Adrian pushed himself up with a pained groan. "I can still fight." "Adrian," she said sharply, "you nearly died." He looked her in the eyes, steady, unyielding. "Then I'll nearly die again. I'm not leaving your side." Her heart slammed against her ribs with a force that frightened her. "Enough," she whispered. "You are wounded." "Then I'll protect you wounded." The insurgents turned the corner. Sarilith lifted her blade. "Very well, fight with me." What followed was not a battle. It was annihilation. Sarilith moved with lethal grace, each strike deadly, each step purposeful. Adrian fought beside her with a determination fueled not by training but by something far more visceral. He refused to let her fall. When the final attacker hit the floor, the corridor was silent except for their heavy breathing. Sarilith deactivated her blade slowly. "You should not have taken that blast. You should not have been in its path." Their eyes met too long, too close. Her chest ached in a way she had spent decades training herself not to feel. "Adrian," she said quietly, "if you had died." He stepped closer, not quite touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of him. "I'm here," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." His sincerity hit harder than any blow she'd taken in battle. Footsteps approached, friendly ones this time. Reinforcements, her guards. By the time the power core was secured and the palace reinforcements flooded the halls, the immediate threat had passed. The final detonator had been disabled, the insurgents eliminated or captured. The palace shield stabilized with a groaning surge of restored energy. The Dominion still stood, but Sarilith did not feel victorious. Her attention kept drifting, again and again, to the man beside her who walked with a slight hitch in his step, whose shoulder was scorched, whose knuckles were raw and bleeding where he had struck armored enemies barehanded, and who insisted every time she glanced at him that he was fine. He was not fine, and the way her chest tightened at the sight was something she could not ignore any longer. As they exited the devastated eastern wing, her chief medical officer approached immediately. "Your Majesty, Captain Holt requires treatment. His injuries." "I'm fine," Adrian interrupted. "You took a blast meant for me," Sarilith said sharply. "You are not fine." The medical officer looked between them, startled by her tone. Sarilith rarely raised her voice, never over one individual, never over a foreign soldier. "Treat him," she ordered. "Now." Adrian opened his mouth to argue, but the look she gave him stopped the words in his throat. Not a queen's command, something far more raw. He nodded silently and followed the medics. Sarilith watched him go. She had led armies across dying worlds without hesitation. She had survived assassination attempts since childhood. She had carried the weight of a vow for 2 decades without faltering. Yet watching Adrian limp down the corridor, supported only by his own stubbornness, made her feel something she did not have a name for. Something frightening, something liberating, something alive. Council emergency sessions began within the hour. Nobles shouted accusations. Generals demanded vengeance. Advisors squabbled over whether the infiltration was a precursor to full rebellion. But Sarilith stood silent, not because she lacked answers, but because her mind kept replaying the moment Adrian stepped in front of a detonator meant to kill her. The way he hadn't hesitated, the way he had breathed her name afterward, the way his eyes, dark and earnest, had searched her face as if confirming she was still there. "Your Majesty," Lord Varanik asked, noticing her distraction. "Your guidance." She blinked once, fixing her posture. "House Varkesh will be dismantled," she said. "Their leaders arrested, their assets seized, any allied houses interrogated." The council murmured in agreement. "And what of the human soldier?" another noble asked, voice dripping with suspicion. "His presence at the scene of the sabotage raises concerns." Sarilith's gaze turned to ice. "Captain Holt saved my life," she said. "He will be honored, not questioned." A murmur rippled through the room, shock, disbelief, thinly veiled outrage. A queen defending a foreigner, publicly, unequivocally. Tradition strained beneath her words. She did not retract them. The council continued, but their arguments drifted to background noise. Sarilith felt detached, as though her body sat in the throne while her mind wandered somewhere else entirely, somewhere with him. When the session finally ended, she did something she had never done in 20 cycles of rule. She excused herself early. The human delegation's medical quarters were quiet when she arrived. Soft lights glowed along the walls. The scent of antiseptic hung in the air. Adrian sat on the edge of a medical bed, half out of his treated uniform, bandages wrapping his shoulder and ribs. His hair was damp. He had clearly been trying unsuccessfully to clean the soot from his face. He looked up when the doors slid open. When he saw her, he froze. "Your Majesty." "Sarilith," she corrected. He exhaled, almost a laugh. "Sarilith, then." She approached slowly, deliberately. He watched her every step, eyes steady but softened by exhaustion. "You should be resting," she said. "I'm alive," he replied. "That's enough." "It is not enough." His brows lifted. "You threw yourself into an explosion," she continued, voice low and sharp. "Do humans consider that bravery or foolishness?" "It wasn't a choice," he said simply. "I saw the detonator activating. I moved." "Toward it?" "Yes." "For me." His jaw flexed. "Yes." There it was, spoken aloud, undeniable. Sarilith felt her pulse thrum beneath her ribs, too fast, too warm. She took another step closer. "Adrian," she said, tasting the unfamiliar name. "Why?" He swallowed, unflinching. "Because losing you," his voice tightened. "Losing you felt impossible." Her breath caught. He continued, softer. "Because in that moment I realized I would rather die than watch harm come to you." Silence heavy. Electric, Sarilith felt her control slipping, the vow she had worn for 20 cycles cracking along fault lines she could no longer ignore. "Adrian," she whispered. He looked at her as if she were something precious, something fragile despite her armor and rank, something worth protecting. "Sarilith," he murmured, "tell me to stop and I will. But if you don't..." She stepped closer until she could feel the warmth of him. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then touched his jaw with feather-like care. His eyes fluttered shut. "This is dangerous," she breathed. "Everything about you is," he answered. She should have pulled away. She was a queen bound by oath. He was a soldier bound by duty. Their worlds were incompatible, their connection impossible. And yet, her thumb traced the line of his cheekbone. Adrian's breath trembled. "Sarilith," he whispered, leaning into her touch as if it anchored him. For a moment, just one, they simply stayed like that. Queen and human, alien and soldier. Two people suspended in a space where fear and longing coexisted. Then she stepped back, not abruptly, not coldly, but with the hesitant reluctance of someone who knew she stood at the edge of a precipice. "I must go," she said softly. "There is much to repair after tonight." Adrian nodded, though disappointment flickered in his eyes. "I understand." The next morning, the palace was quieter than it had any right to be after an attempted coup. Too quiet. The kind of silence that forms when every noble, every general, every advisor waits to see what their queen will do next. Sarilith walked through the grand corridors with a measured stride, her ceremonial armor polished, her blade sheathed at her hip. Externally, she was composed. Internally, fault lines she had ignored for 20 cycles pulsed like living wounds. She had almost lost him, and for the first time in her reign, the fear had not been for her empire. Near the throne hall entrance, her guard captain approached. "Your Majesty, the Council of Houses is assembled. They await your judgment." Of course they did. Rebellion required punishment, unity required reassurance, and tradition demanded she stand above emotion. But tradition had not shielded her from the detonation. Adrian Holt had. Sarilith inhaled slowly. "Begin the session." When she entered, every noble rose. 17 banners hung from the vaulted ceiling like the eyes of history watching her. She took her seat at the center of the throne dais. "Before we discuss reparations and justice," she began, "I must address the events of last night." Nobles leaned forward eagerly. Some expected a display of wrath, others feared a display of weakness. None expected what came next. "Captain Adrian Holt of humanity," Sarilith said clearly, "protected me with such determination that he nearly died. In doing so, he exposed the failures of our own security and the decay within our own houses. No Varanth warrior acted with his decisiveness." A murmur rippled through the hall. Lord Varkesh's envoy stepped forward, desperate. "Your Majesty, relying on an outsider." Silence. Her voice cut the air like a blade. The envoy froze. Sarilith stood, something she rarely did during council. The hall felt smaller when she rose, her presence filling it like a storm could fill a sky. "For 20 cycles," she said, "I bound myself to a vow of isolation. A vow I believed necessary to protect the Dominion. No one dared breathe. But last night proved what I have long refused to admit. Strength does not come from solitude. It comes from alliance, from trust. Her gaze hardened. From those willing to bleed for you when others only seek power. What are you saying? A noble whispered, horrified. Sarilith lifted her chin. I am rescinding my vow. Shock exploded through the room, voices rising, hands slamming against tables, some nobles shouting impossible, while others simply sat in stunned silence. She raised a hand, and the hall fell still. For years, I believed that attachment would weaken my rule. I see now that refusing connection has weakened my understanding of my people. A ruler who cannot feel cannot lead. A queen who cannot trust cannot unify. Lord Varanik sputtered, Your Majesty, to break a sacred vow. A sacred vow made in ignorance, she corrected sharply. One I no longer honor. She looked over the silent assembly, eyes bright with a conviction she had denied for far too long. Captain Holt taught me to question what I believed immutable. He taught me that vulnerability is not the same as weakness, and he reminded me that life, mine included, is not meant to be endured alone. Her voice softened, but the hall heard every word. I choose connection, I choose alliance, and I choose to build a future in which our strength grows through trust, not fear. The council erupted again, some cheering, some outraged, many stunned into silence. But Sarilith was finished with them. I will speak with all houses individually, she said with a dismissive wave. This session is concluded. The nobles slowly dispersed, buzzing with speculation, scandal, and disbelief. Sarilith left through the private corridor behind the dais, the same one she had used countless times with unshakable certainty. Today, her steps felt different. Today, they carried her toward someone. Captain Adrian Holt waited in the quiet observation balcony above the palace gardens, leaning against the railing with a stiffness that betrayed lingering pain. When he saw her, he straightened abruptly. Your Majesty. Sarilith, she corrected again. He swallowed. Sarilith. She approached until only a breath separated them. I made an announcement today, she said softly, one that will reshape my empire. Adrian's brows lifted. What kind of announcement? I broke my vow. Shock flickered across his face, then worry. Sarilith, you didn't have to do that for. I didn't do it for you, she interrupted, but there was warmth in her tone. I did it because I realized that a vow made to avoid fear is not a vow worth keeping. Her voice lowered, and because you showed me a truth I had forgotten, that strength grows when shared. Adrian exhaled shakily. What does that mean? For you, for us. She reached up slowly, reverently, and touched his face again. This time, Adrian lifted his hand to cover hers, fingers brushing her wrist. It means, she whispered, that if you want a place beside me, I will not deny it. Not anymore. The breath he drew sounded like a man surfacing from deep water. Sarilith, he said, voice hoarse, I want that more than anything I've ever allowed myself to want. Her heart gave a painful, beautiful twist. Then come, she murmured, stepping closer. Stand with me as more than a soldier, more than a guest, as someone I choose. His hand cupped her cheek. You have me, he said, with sincerity that struck like a pulse of light. For as long as you want me. She closed her eyes.
Mira, 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 pastito para andar de ladito, compareirum. Mire. No, chatón, imagínense, güey. Uf. Mira, Irum, para andar de ladito en el pastito.
Soy Charlie, quiere que le dediques un dibujo.
Híjole, los dibujos por IG. Envíame mensaje y dime la palabra dibujo. Mira, están jugando golf. Qué a gusto. Jugar golf. Chale, güey, si fueron 48 pesos, le hubiera venido, la neta. Qué desperdiciadero, güey. Ah. Hola. Gracias. Por Insta, sí. O por Discord, cualquiera de las dos. La nave curveando, chatoncio. Aquí no, aquí no, aquí no. Uy, güey, qué miedo. Ah, que la chingada. Bola de desgraciados. Se dejaron ir con los sonidos macizos ahorita, ¿ah? Pinche racilla, güey. 48 pesos de este pedido, banda. Para haber estado adivinando la dirección del cliente. Man. 48 pesos. 997 viewers. ¡A huevo! A ver. A la verga, güey. Sí. Pinche Twitch, güey. Gracias por la oportunidad de estar en portada el Día del Niño.
Solo se van.
Se reprodujo esta carta.
¿48 pesos por cuántos kilómetros? Ay, fueron como 7, güey. 7 y 7, 14. Ida y vuelta. No, no lo vale, güey, la neta.